Good day, I'm sailing the Helios 11 solar yacht prototype south. Soon we will reach Germany and get down to the canals, and eventually, if everything works, we will reach the warmth of the Mediterranean, heading to Spain, maybe the Greek archipelago. I'm very much looking forward to that. In the previous mission log, we talked about the solar input, and today is gonna be an even more exciting topic of the next build, the catamaran versus the monohull, and what types of inventions we can create together to head into the future of fully autonomous solar yachts that not only feel free, but they will travel faster than sailing boats and outperform even power boats in certain settings, because you can go so fast if you're able to have this essentialist hull design and interior design that results in an ultralight vehicle on the water that barely leaves any wake. I've gotten a lot of valuable feedback and comments from you. I've read them all, and based on this, as well as my personal experience here out on the sea, I've now concluded that the next yacht most likely will be a catamaran, but we're gonna go for a hybrid hull type. Until we are able to build actual ships running on solar power, the catamaran will be the highest ROI for comfort, speed, and seaworthiness. This 11-meter prototype is actually kind of too light, and it rolls a lot in the waves, especially when it comes from the side. If I go straight toward the waves, it's a very smooth ride, but usually you can't, of course, predict what weather you're gonna have. So let's say we have 1 or 2 meter waves from the side, we're gonna be rolling a lot. It's not dangerous, it's just uncomfortable and inefficient, and that is why I'm looking very much forward to maybe in a year or two start constructing the next version, a 4 to 5 meter wide, 13 meter long performance catamaran that will have a lot of space indoors, a lightweight build, and supreme aesthetics. Let's go more into depth with that and different hull types and their advantages once I get to harbor in Germany. Currently, we're sailing through the magical windmill forests in the most southern parts of Denmark, around 45 miles left to Germany. The weather is nice, there's barely any waves. We got the backup sail here, and we got Faye here also. Say hello. She's been along the journey since Sweden. Currently we're going around 4.5 knots with barely any power output from the engine, just using the sail, and the batteries are charging slightly from the sunlight that barely peeks through the clouds sometimes. Alright, we've now made it all the way to Hanover in Germany. Let's take a look at the designs I've been working on. So first, this is the Proa design that could be the easiest one to produce. And then I have a monolithic twin hull that I currently call the Halo 13. Also, the monohull version is an option, but really the catamaran or the Proa design have huge benefits when it comes to stability and the solar area, solar input you can get, and therefore I'm leaning very much toward developing a catamaran for my next boat. Before we go deeper into my designs, I just want to highlight how efficient this current Helios 11 prototype is, and based on this one I have a very optimistic future predictions of what we can create with a simple build and straightforward design, whether it's gonna be a monohull or a multi-hull. And a peculiar thing I've learned also about the yacht design of ultra lightweight hulls is that the skin friction actually becomes a significant part of the resistance of the boat compared to the displacement or wave-making resistance. When you have a lighter boat, such as the Helios 11, the skin friction is quite large actually when you compare it to the wave-making resistance, especially at low speeds. So if you want to make a super efficient, low cruise speed catamaran, that might not even be more efficient than a single hull. But I believe that immediately once you want to go for higher speeds, that's something I prefer. I want to jump between cities, between countries very quick, and then just charge up batteries in between. If I want to go for such a quick design, the monohull actually will not be as efficient as the multi-hull. And of course the multi-hull or the twin hull has more solar area, so that takes out that increased surface friction that you get from having multiple hulls submerged into the water. And now, so you can understand the philosophy of my ultra lightweight solar yacht design, here are some pros and cons of catamarans versus monohulls. As I said, the catamaran, especially on a lightweight build, gets a significantly larger skin friction compared to its displacement resistance. So if you have a moderate to inefficient solar build, you should not go for a catamaran, but once the efficiency and the speed estimation becomes higher, then it's definitely reasonable to go for a catamaran build, even a trimaran. The catamaran is a bigger and more expensive build. You need a higher budget and a bigger place and higher skilled employees as well. The catamaran has less usable space as long as it's not a huge catamaran. A catamaran has more solar area, which is a plus. It has more mass. It has significantly increased windage, especially from the front. For my models of a 15-meter monohull versus a 13-meter twin hull, the twin hull will be significantly more efficient at speeds of over 8 knots. And then finally, for my lifestyle in particular, the rapid city and country hopping option at full speed is a big plus for the catamaran. Now let's start with the simplest design. I would definitely go for the monohull if rolling in waves was not an issue, but I believe even if I make this 15 to 16 meter monohull, pretty narrow hull, and very low center of balance, it would still be rolling in the waves. Let's take a look at some estimates here. So with these type of adjustable solar panels on the roof and more sleek build and roughly a 3 or 3.5 meter wide hull, we could get 40 or more square meters of adjustable panels, and then we would have these additional sails of 15 to 20 square meters, which would significantly increase the long cruising capacity of this vessel. Here I should have the illustration, of the sail, so you can see having one of these huge, average sails in the front and one also here in the rear to bring some balance adds significant propulsion to this ultra slender and ultra lightweight hull. I really love the combination of solar and wind power sails, because then you actually don't need any backup engine. You have a complete backup system with the sails, a keel that could increase the directional stability and also could be slightly weighted to potentially reduce rolling. But these just look so aesthetic, and you can take them out quickly or just leave them overnight because they're so small. The boat is stable enough because the sails are fairly low and moderate in size, as well as the very low center of gravity because of the batteries you can place under the waterline. You really don't need to optimize the boat for sailing. You just put on the sails and that's it. And now you have roughly 1 to 3 kilowatts of additional propulsion, depending on the wind, of course. A foldable keel, potentially slightly weighted, would add a lot of stability to the yacht. And then of course there's a powerful electric engine here in the rear, bringing the boat up to planing speeds, because this flat hull, this flat bottom really carries the boat. You have to have a very flat bottom, a very wide build to make the boat stable enough, because you have no huge mass underneath the water. Potentially a round hull plus a weighted keel could also be an option, but the roundness of a hull increases the amount of rolling in the waves, so you need to balance that out with a bigger keel. Perhaps this small keel here could be increased, and then you would make a round hull, but the round hull of course increases build complexity while also then positively reducing the drag, but not significantly. This semi-round hull made out of plywood is already fairly efficient, but there will be some slamming which reduces the comfort and the luxury. This monohull would have a 30 kilowatt engine, roughly 100 kilowatt hour of battery capacity, extra low wind drag, almost none. Imagine the waterline here, and this is the only thing you see 1.7 meters above the waterline, and then almost no protrusions out from the boat. Of course the sails, but you would take the sails away when you're sailing headwind, and really no resistance from the wind, which is a super huge feature. The low wind resistance is very important on a lightweight solar yacht, so that's maybe one of the biggest benefits actually of the monohull, that you bury a lot of the windage under the water, and the hull, because it's so efficient in terms of space, you can use all of this. You really don't need to make a large boat. This is huge, 3.5 meters, and at least 10 meters of cabin means that you have an over 30 square meter apartment that you can take anywhere. That's the brief presentation of the Helios 15. Do you think it would work? And let me know if there's any ideas you would have to increase the rolling stability of that boat, because if you can make a monohull stable enough in rolling conditions, which is the biggest concern in terms of comfort and also performance, then you really have something powerful, because it's so simple. Just make a straight, beautiful hull and it glides through the water, very efficient at medium to low speeds. The Helios 15 would be super efficient at 7 to 10 knots, and potentially with a 30 kilowatt engine or slightly more, it would rise up to a planing speed or semi-planing speed, and you could do these city hopping travels I very much like. Moving over from the sleek monohull design, we have the proa. The biggest difference here is that you can make bottom sharper, narrower, potentially round, and it doesn't matter if it rolls, because you have one additional pontoon that is gonna take much of the rolling motion away. But why not just make a trimaran when you already have one additional pontoon on the side? That's a good question I asked myself, and you're probably thinking about that as well. If we make a trimaran out of this design right in front of me, we would end up with a very wide yacht. And the build would be more complex, and then it would just make sense to do a catamaran instead. So the proa is a mix of the multi-hull and the single hull, and this asymmetrical design is actually favorable, because when you have a lot of extra solar panels here, you're able to adjust them slightly. When you're in anchorage or in the harbor, you can adjust the facing of your pontoon side, and then you will have almost 100% efficiency of those solar panels, and that's gonna be a huge increase in recharging your batteries between journeys where you go all the way to 0% battery capacity. So those are the main benefits of the proa design. I really would like to do something unique, and this proa design, this asymmetrical design, is something that people are probably scared of, because we as humans want to have order, we want to have something that looks identical on both sides, and the proa would be the exception that could outperform the catamaran on long journeys, because it carries over a lot of that medium to low speed efficiency of the monohull. And a small flavor bonus of the proa is that extra space you have, pull out some tables, chairs, and have a real party. But I'm not entirely sure just how efficient the additional pontoon is in reducing rolling motion. Performance-wise, it's a huge upgrade because you get roughly 20 to 30% additional solar input, and that super narrow pontoon barely slows down the boat at all. I'm a bit mixed with this Proa design, and because of that, I think it's best we just try it out. So we have this monohull, and maybe in a couple months I'm gonna find somebody to help me, and then we will build another pontoon on the side, fitting I think 4 or 5 full-size solar panels. I made some calculations, and that would increase the solar input of this yacht by roughly 35%, and in turn the water resistance would only increase by roughly 8%, so that's a huge win, plus the stability. And if this Proa upgrade works very well, then I think the next yacht will be a Proa design. Both the monohull and the Proa design are very exciting future projects, but this Halo 13 monolithic twin hull is what activates my future innovator instincts. Let's take a closer look at this ambitious design that I hope will be the most optimal, because I really want to do this one. Here's the first plan of the Halo 13, and we would need roughly 300k to pull that off. I think the monohull would only cost around $150,000 to create, and the Proa maybe $200,000 to $230,000. And here we have the Halo 13. We really need to make a lot of views on these videos so we can start building this as fast as possible, maybe in a year or two. That is my wish and my estimate. So here the point is a very simple build that optimizes solar area. You can put solar panels here, adjustable, and on the roof flat panels, huge solar area. These super narrow 50 centimeter waterline width hulls would pierce through the waves and almost leave no wake at all. Very low resistance at high speeds, and the sharp V hull here, it's not a compromise or a super simplified build. It is also that, but actually you don't need additional keels when you have such sharp holes that pierce into the water. I ran some estimates. According to my research and advisor council, the plywood design would be the most optimal. You do it with almost completely straight lines, especially for the solar panel areas. These V shapes are very rigid as you have bulkheads inside of these pontoons. A double floor and a torsion resistant box combined with the fairly narrow catamaran design. As you can see, this one is roughly 4.6 meters wide currently in its design. I don't want to make a super wide catamaran because it's simply too large. 4.6 meters of usable room space is huge, and the cabin would be up to 2 meters high. Before I show you the side profile of this build and go through the estimated details here, I want to explain the reason of this hull shape. So here we have the combination of a catamaran and a monohull. As you can see, it's pretty much a single box, very sturdy, and the torsion of these two hulls moving in the waves is very low, and that's why the result is a very rigid construction. I've made the hull as low as possible. I'm 180, so the roof needs to be at roughly 1.95, and that's gonna feel spacious enough. Here's the waterline, and you can see that this catamaran has an exceptionally low windage from the front. That would be the biggest concern when building a solar catamaran. If you get trapped in huge headwind, you're gonna burn out of battery very quickly, because let's say if you had a normal catamaran, it would have, I think, 3 times the windage. Of course, that would mean more solar input,
But why not instead have your solar input on the length of your boat? That's why I'm gonna show you now the side profile of this concept. This might be an old image, but it's fairly accurate. So 30 meters long, very long waterline length, which increases the hull speed. A lot of space for solar panels. Perhaps we're gonna put the cabin further in the back. We can make some changes still. And if you take a look at the estimated waterline here, you can see that the windage from the side of this boat is also very low. So this means that you don't need to have very deep keels to prevent heeling or drifting in the water. And maybe the biggest benefit of this design, it looks kind of like a Batmobile Batboat. Very cool, very futuristic. I can see that vision already, sailing smoothly, silently and rapidly. Now let's take a look at the numbers of the Halo 13 monolithic twin hull. So the main panels would be at least 42, and that would lead to a total power input of 20 to 21 kilowatts. I'm using estimates for slightly improved panels we could have in 1 or 2 years, or better panels you could custom order from a factory. And additional panels would generate roughly 3 kilowatts, and here are the estimates for real world efficiency in cloudy and sunny conditions. 3.6 kilowatt in cloudy, that would mean an indefinite speed of maybe 5 or 6 knots. And in sunny conditions, we would generate huge amounts of power. With additional sails, similar to the one I showed you in the monohull, we could get an estimated power input of roughly 2 kilowatts. It really varies. Sometimes we could get up to like 10 kilowatts, 20 kilowatts if we have optimal wind. Here I made a table for estimated speeds at different wattages, also including the sail additional thrust. These are based on what I've learned while field testing the Helios 11, as well as from the deep work I've been doing together with my automation systems of yacht design. In this boat we could put a battery capacity of 100 to 150 kilowatts, and we have an impressive freeboard height of 90 to 95 centimeters. Very low center of gravity, because we would put all the batteries under the waterline of the hull. We make sure everything is watertight and there will be no problems. As backup or night power systems, I would add some windmills, especially useful if you want to go into colder climates or get trapped in a storm. To further optimize the build, I would also go for this low profile furniture design. We have to try that out, of course, first. Low profile beds, wool, linen and thin wood as interior finishing. We can have some insulation, but my mindset of going into yacht design and heat insulation is this question. If you own a yacht, why would you be in a cold climate? That's why I'm currently escaping winter on the Helios 11, currently sitting in harbor. It is 10 degrees outside and this is tolerable, but of course I would never go back to Finland or Germany in wintertime. The final notes of the twin hull are about coastal cruise and cross-country travel, which would be 100% optimized for my lifestyle. Maximum comfort and speed, designed for rapid 50 to 100 nautical mile jumps at over 10 knots speed. But I also do want to travel across the Atlantic, across the Pacific Ocean, and this boat would be 90% optimized for that kind of travel. High comfort, roughly 8 knots of speed over 150 to 200 mile distances. And then for indefinite range travel, we could probably reach over 7 knots without the sails being included. So with the sails and favorable winds, 8 knots indefinite speed is very easy to achieve. There's a big question regarding all of these designs. Should we use plywood or foam core sandwich construction? In theory, foam core is better.
the build becomes slightly lighter and it's easier to make round shapes. I ran all the estimates I could, very sharply aware of my bias toward simple construction with plywood, and still the end result is that plywood is more efficient. First of all, the budget of the boat and the time to build it would be lower. So that leaves you with two options if you have the same budget. You build a bigger boat out of plywood, or then you build a slightly smaller boat that is perhaps a bit more efficient, but it's smaller, so it's gonna be less efficient. It's gonna have less solar area, it's gonna have a lower hull speed, and perhaps most importantly, you will have less living space inside that boat. Secondly, if we would use foam core sandwich construction, it's more difficult to make adjustments on the go. Here's an example. If I now want to add this proa design here, I can just bolt things into the sturdy plywood, make some reinforcements, some additional sheets of plywood or steel right here, and then we would probably make a very strong construction. If I want to attach something, I can just add bolts, screws anywhere, and it's fairly strong. This is not true for a foam core design. It's very soft, the skin is not that tough, especially if I want to go for a lightweight design. So whenever I want to add something or refit on a foam core design, it would be very complicated. A lightweight foam core design also has lower skin thickness. It's very easy to penetrate through it, but then again, if I have, according to my design, roughly 12 millimeters of plywood on the bottom, covered with 3 layers of thick glass fiber, that's very difficult to puncture. A, let's say, 5 centimeter foam core with just 1 or 2 layers of glass fiber, that's super easy to penetrate. And if I put more glass fiber on top of the foam core, we just end up with a heavier build, and then there's no reason to have foam core. An example would be the dinghy I made out of XPS foam and covered it with 1 layer of glass fiber. The glass fiber is actually not even necessary, the foam is in itself strong enough, but you have to cover it with something to protect the foam. And that's a huge problem with lightweight design, because you almost get all the rigidity you need from the foam itself. The third benefit of plywood, it's wood. It's much more higher in quality. It's much more aesthetic. It feels better. A plastic boat feels cheap. Even if I would walk into a luxury yacht, I would sense that this is plastic. I don't want to touch this. I want something genuine. Of course, the foam core provides much better insulation, but that won't be a problem because I will be spending time in summer, and so should anyone who lives on a yacht. We can have some insulation in the wooden construction, maybe using foam sheets strategically, combining that with wool, multiple layers of linen. You don't need to have a full insulation because there's so much energy on a solar yacht that you can just put on the batteries and everything will be warm as long as you're not in a completely cold winter climate. So I've made a lot of bold claims here. It's important to remain humble, and I know I haven't spent enough time on different kind of boats, so only one who has spent tens of years on boats, different hull constructions, different materials, would really know. So if you have some valuable information regarding the foam core versus plywood, I would be eager to listen to your comments. Put them down below and I'll include some of that perhaps in the next video. Now it is time, after all of these revelations from the True North Yachts developments, it is time for us to head further. Tomorrow we're gonna head out from Hanover in Germany and reach as far south as we possibly can. The weather is fairly warm currently, and I hope that we can get further south before the winter arrives to Germany. Thanks for watching this video. Stay tuned to the mission by subscribing, and as always, don't forget to get out there.